Lake effect snows are underway in southwestern New York as well as in north central New York and also in and around the other Great Lakes. We're going to be talking about that. Below normal temperatures going into next week, just the beginning. Thanksgiving week, we've got that outlook for you and some storm signals for the end of next week. It's all going to be discussed in such incredible detail that you will be amazed all tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. They serve the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area and beyond with everything you need this winter. They are Long Island's largest rock salt source, so in case you can't find it where you are, you can head over there. Also, all the great snow and ice melt products on the market. Pelleto, Mad Ice Pellets and Flakes. You might need a new snowblower. I like the colors of this one, those two. And of course, batteries, flashlights, shovels, scrapers, spreaders, you name it, they have it. 631-756-1125. Best prices around, not just in town, but anywhere. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. Joe.
Good evening, Mr. Rayo. I said last night that if we ever got the opportunity to go up into Lake Effect Land to watch one of these things, we probably would regret it within a few inches. And after a few inches got on the ground, and I hold to that tonight. I'm going to think twice, though. But I really would like to do that, though. I really would love to go up there and just watch it.
Well, if you had a guarantee that you could get out, let's say right after the last flake fell, because I'm sure that, but what they're doing right now in Buffalo is they're trying to keep up with the storm. Maybe today was the first 1 or 2 feet. Tomorrow will be another foot or two. Saturday will be another foot or two. And you just stay with it. I just hope people who have snowblowers have ample amount of gas so that they can stay ahead of all of this, because it is one of those amazing, incredible lake effect storms that I guess they get on average once every 8 or 10 years. And the last one, of course, was back in 2014, and this one looks like it's going to be right in there with the 2014 event, the one in 2000, and going all the way back to the one back in 1977.
All right, so if we have to wait 8 or 10 years, that means we'll be in our mid-70s. we may need someone to take us up there.
Yes.
So, looking ahead, I thought the pattern looked very interesting. Forgetting the specifics in terms of whatever the models are doing, I honestly, at this stage of the game, it's to me it's a pointless exercise to try and figure out what the low is. But I think if you observe the overall situation of what's going on next week, there's potential, I think, for the end of the week into next weekend with the next precipitation producer, because we're going to be dry right through Thanksgiving Day, but there's blocking setting up, and I think the question for me is, when I looked at everything today, is this blocky pattern that is going to form, is it going to be, as always with these things, is it too much, too little, too much, and you wind up getting a very suppressed look like the European had, which just basically overwhelms cold air everywhere in the east, and just you wouldn't get a thing. Or if it's too little, which is something that the off model runs, the 6 and 18Z runs, for example, are showing that idea. And I've kind of strayed away from them because it just seems odd to me that they would do that. So I'm guessing it's because I'm sure it's because they're handling the block differently. So if you just look at the main runs, I think it's going to be a question of, is the block going to be strong enough to force a low to the south, or is it going to be too strong and just overwhelm everything, and that will just be cold and dry, and you'll wind up taking something maybe off the southeast coast and passing well to the south. That's kind of where my head is at right now.
Well, the GFS has been the model of choice if you are rooting for a major storm. In fact, they have an incredibly strong. I looked carefully at this. It looks like a 6 contour cutoff low situated over the northeastern United States by the end of next week. But meantime, the European and Canadian models are far less aggressive with this setup and have pretty much, as you pointed out, Joe, pushed a lot of the potential adverse weather off away to our south and to our east. So the question is, which of these models will be correct? Will the European and the Canadian come over to the GFS camp, or will the GFS give up on its look for a major system in our part of the country by the end of next week and say, okay, well, it's not going to happen, and go with the idea that the European and the Canadian are suggesting that there's going to be a lot less in terms of a threat by the end of next week.
Yeah, those two models are showing a block that's too strong. I always get such a kick out of people when they look at let's just say when they look at a random snow situation when you're dealing with all the different variables. The immediate, and I have to say, at some level for me, it's a very tiresome response. If we only had blocking, well, guess what? If you have too much blocking, if you have too much blocking, it's no good. Not if you want snow up in the northern mid Atlantic up into southern New England. You have to have just the right amount, and you can hope and pray for a block all you want if you're a snow lover, but if it winds up being too much, you're not going to see anything. So at the end of the day, we're never going to be in a position 8 days out to really put a finger on which way this is all going to go. I would say we might be able to resolve the idea of whether we're going to be getting something over the weekend sometime, and then after that we can start to figure out if we are going to wind up getting something after that. Maybe on Monday or Tuesday of next week, we'll have a better way. We'll certainly have a better idea of how to fit it in as far as a forecast is concerned.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to see. Again, we're about more than a week away from this potential, and again, the models have to ferret out what's going to happen. And indeed, this is a setup. We're into a cold weather pattern now, so I'm sure a lot of folks out there who are snow lovers are saying, okay, we've got the cold, let's get the storm up here. But as you pointed out, Joe, sometimes you look for a block, but sometimes you may go overboard with the block, and the block may work against you instead of working with you. So
yep.
That's what again the Canadian and the European models are suggesting. The GFS is suggesting something else, and it hopefully will all come into focus when we get closer to this event. Maybe by coffee with Joe and Joe on Sunday morning. This coming Sunday morning, we'll have a much better idea as to what's going to happen. But right now, it's still, if you don't mind the expression, still all up in the air at this point in time.
Paul Roman is an early Super Chat tip jar hit. Thank you, Paul. Most appreciated, as always. We thank you for your generosity and for your support. Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight, and also welcome to all of you who are lurking in the background, shy folks that don't like to participate in the conversation, which is fine, but we appreciate that you are watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show. There is a link on the top of the chat board so you can download my free weather apps, the Meteorologist Joe Cioffi weather app and Angry Ben's Angry Weather app. Both are free, and you can access those Google Play and App Store links by clicking the link that's pinned to the top of the chat board. So at this time, let us now adventure to the National Weather Service office in Buffalo, New York, where they've got the snowfall forecast map of the moment, and I don't know if you saw this today, Mr. Rayo, but they added, I don't think I've ever seen this, or maybe I have and I've just forgotten. But they have a max area southwest of Buffalo. By the way, notice that how tight the gradient is from where you go from 60 inches to 8 to 12 to uh, 3 to 4 and so on. Uh, this is again, lake effect is a such a it's certainly a localized weather phenomena, and I'm not expert in how to forecast lake effect, so we'll leave it up to the folks in the Weather Service office at in Buffalo. And you can see they got a 48 to 60 inch area
Yeah.
highlighted there. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen 48 to 60 on a map over the years. At least I don't remember seeing one.
God, and that's just you know measured straight straight across. That does not include any potential snow drifts, and I'm sure the drifts are a lot higher than that. It's just absolutely amazing, and again, all due to a very persistent southwesterly wind flow over Lake Erie and literally pushing all of that heavy snow right into the area just to the south of downtown Buffalo. It's just incredible. Now, I do believe I heard on the news tonight that they have moved the Browns game with the Buffalo Bills to Detroit. I believe I heard that correctly. So there will be a football game with the Buffalo Bills on Sunday, but it will not be in Buffalo, and it won't be in the Browns uh, stadium because they are under the gun for possible lake effect snow. So they're going to play it in Detroit. And interestingly, once the Buffalo Bills arrive in Detroit, they can stay there for most of next week because they're going to be playing the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving Day. So, and I really was wishing that they would stay in Buffalo for this game because I love watching football games when the field is absolutely covered in snow and they're picking up at best 2 and 3 yards per play, but it's not going to happen. It'll be in Detroit on Sunday. So there you go.
And by the way, it should be noted here, this is an event that's going to carry through Sunday. So in some areas, I would imagine in those areas that really get hit very hard, the snow is going to be more continuous. But in other areas, there'll be breaks in between. So that will help. I guess that certainly would help out in terms of any cleanup that the folks are going to have to deal with. And by the way, let's not forget also that we have big snows also forecast for north central New York up I-81 north of Syracuse. Syracuse is not going to see a thing out of this, and it's not a long drive at all to go from Syracuse up to Pulaski. Where they're going to see from the Buffalo Weather Service forecast going 18 to 24, and they have a stripe of 24 plus just to the east of there, and also further north. Watertown is in 18 to 24, but Clayton, New York, which is right on the Canadian border there, they're going for 36 to 48 up there. So you've got two areas here in New York State that are potentially going to get hit hard, and then you have that area in between the two where several inches, 2, 3, or 4 inches being forecast for places like Sodus and Albion and Dansville 2 to 3, Rochester, excuse me, only an inch or two, and then you get to the other big area that goes to the southwest. Now, the other area that I was watching is from the Weather Service office in Cleveland, and they have chosen not to put out a total through the event, so they've been kind of breaking it down. So this map, it has snowed there today in a lot of this area, and they're just going for snowfall through tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So on top of whatever's fallen in Erie, another 2 to 3 inches there, and Corey, another inch or two in Pennsylvania. On the Ohio side, 1 to 2 in Ashtabula, one, less than an inch in Mentor and Chardon, and Cleveland is kind of right on that edge of less than an inch. But I should probably just take a look and see, do a little quick math. We'll go to the Weather Service office in Cleveland. They do not have, by the way, any watches or warnings up for this area at the moment. So, and in fact, if we look at the radar here out of Cleveland, you can see a batch of snow is now moving across Lake Erie and kind of touching the shores east of Cleveland. But the heavier band is in that dark green that's out in the middle of the lake. So that doesn't seem to be close to any land, and it probably won't be anytime soon. On their forecast, oh, we do have a low water advisory, Joe, just so in case for
Yeah.
the area of Lake Erie between Sandusky and Toledo, which is inland, but they have a low water advisory. It seems on the Canadian side, I believe. So let me just take a look and see with Cleveland what they're forecasting. And they're not really forecasting very much for Cleveland at all. An inch or two Saturday night and 2 to 4 on Sunday. So that's probably when that's the strongest trough moves through Saturday night into Sunday. That's what's probably going to impact that part of Ohio at least.
I'm reading the discussion here from National Weather Service Forecast Office in Buffalo, and it reads like a novel. I mean, this is one of the longest discussions I've ever seen, and for both the near term and also for the short term, they headline crippling lake effect snow. And they're talking about places getting 2 to 3 inches per hour. They're talking about a long fetch down Lake Erie that will support very intense snow bands with snowfall rates in excess of 3 inches an hour, and also some lightning strikes as well. Yes, since the water is so warm, relatively speaking, to the air that's flowing over it, you tend to get a lot of lifting and sometimes occasional convection. So you get hold of one of those thunder snows, and you could very easily see 3 inches or more per hour. You could easily see 4 or 5 inches per hour. So all of this will be in place for overnight and on through the day on Friday. And then gradually, they basically are going to be watching where the snow bands are going to be, where they're going to be moving, how quickly they will be moving. And let me just see here. For what it's worth, the snowfall record Friday for Buffalo is 8.2 inches, set back in November 2000, a lake effect snow event that preceded the big November 2023 snow event that left many stranded and produced the greatest November daily snowfall of 24.9 inches on the 20th. So there you go. We're looking at all kinds of history being made in the next couple of days in and around the Buffalo area.
Thomas Eddy hitting the tip jar. Thank you, Thomas. I think that's a new name on the chat board. Welcome aboard, and hope you take part in the conversation. Thank you so much. So, on the idea that we've got all that lake effect going on, you would think that one of these upper troughs would create a little squall line of snow showers that would carry through to our neck of the woods, just to give us a cheap thrill. Doesn't look all that promising, except for the fact that I did notice that the HRRR, I believe on a Friday night, when I looked at it, has a what looks like a little line of snow showers moving across Pennsylvania and then basically drying up by the time it reaches the coast. So I suppose it's not impossible that as these upper troughs that are swinging through, that one of them might produce a couple of snow showers as it goes by.
Well, they've got a cold front that is literally racing across New York and Pennsylvania tomorrow, and will be moving rapidly through our area, and probably will be through, I would say, probably by 5 or 6 o'clock. So it may get the skies may fill with clouds for a short while late tomorrow evening. But whether or not anything falls out of those clouds in the form of snow, even if it does, what is it going to do? It's moving so quickly that you can get a couple of snowflakes in the air, quickly the front moves on by, and we go right back into a much drier airflow for later tomorrow night. Skies will become mostly clear, and it should lead us into a bright and sunny day on Saturday and for much of the day on Sunday, too. It must really look strange. It must really look eerie. No pun intended when we speak of Lake Erie, but here you are, you're driving under bright sunshine, let's say westward on one of the interstates or one of the local highways, and you literally can see as you approach Buffalo, you literally can see the clouds, the gray clouds towering in front of you. And, say to yourself, well, should I or shouldn't I? Because once you get underneath those clouds, that's it. It's all over. The snow is with you, and whether or not you're going to be able to escape or turn around and get out of that is questionable as well. But it's so, you talk about a micro scale or micro scale weather event. This is it. This really is it. Most of New York State bright and sunny this upcoming weekend, but places again right immediately adjacent to Lakes Ontario and Lake Erie, you will be dealing with some snow, some more potentially heavy-duty snow.
Look, I got the Buffalo radar up, and looking at it right now, there is a heavy snow band that is now moved into Buffalo, or just on the south side of Buffalo. There's some pretty impressive echoes in here too for snow, especially just southeast of Buffalo. The area is moving to the east, so that heavy snow band that we saw in Lake Erie on the Cleveland radar is probably destined to go, if it holds together, into southwestern New York.
I'm reading Robert Woods on the chat board saying Weather Channel reporter is in Buffalo and it snowed for 5 minutes and a quick dusting, then stopped, then started again, and lightning. Well, yeah, he said that the lightning convection certainly is a distinct possibility with this particular weather pattern shaping up. And you get underneath one of those. I wonder if they're going to have, people who are out there in the snow from the Weather Channel, for example, screaming and yelling if they do run into, some locally heavy snow bands, lightning and thunder. Yeah. We've seen that, right, over recent years. And,
by the way, I've drawn a circle around what I think is probably the lightning being produced by a thunderstorm. You can see the enhanced yellow echo there, just passing Buffalo.
Probably Cantori is underneath that right now.
Yeah, and yes, and there are a few others. There's a couple of small cells sitting right out in Lake Erie to the northwest of Dunkirk, moving east-northeast. So that band, again, destined for Buffalo. This area is probably going to put down a fair amount of snow in the next 4 or 5 hours.
Yep. Yeah. And just so many people here on the chat board mentioning that Cantori is there already. He's been there since the morning. I don't know about you, Joe. I mean, I've gotten to the point now where if I was assigned to go to Buffalo to cover this, I'm not quite sure. 20 years ago was a different story with me, and I'm sure with you as well. But I'm not quite sure right now if I'd be so enthusiastic and so excited to go to a place like Buffalo getting hammered with all of this snow. I just hope that Cantori can get back to his hotel. I assume he's going to be in a hotel. Well, imagine if he's staying in a van or a panel truck or whatever.
Oh yeah, no, not at certainly not at our age. No. It better be a hotel.
Yes.
On the wider radar view here, you can actually see the 2 of the 3 troughs that are in play. So here's the first one with this area of snow. The second one, to me, looks like it's back near Lake Michigan. And there is a cold front that's being analyzed near there that is moving eastward. So that after this first area plays through, there'll be a bit of a break, and then they'll get the second area. We'll start enhancing snows tomorrow over Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And the third upper trough is still back up in Canada. It hasn't quite swung around yet, and that's going to be for Saturday into Sunday. So they got a long way to go before this is all done.
I'm laughing at Tom Contino's comment on the chat board. He said, Joe Rayo, you used to be a snow lover? Tom Contino, let me tell you that back in the late 70s and through much of the 80s, whenever I saw a situation where a synoptic situation for the New York area, which showed signs of dropping 6 or more inches of snow on New York, and especially if we had a chance to get like a foot or more of snow, if you're a football fan, if you remember Mark Gastineau of the New York Jets, every time he grabbed a quarterback and flung him down, Gastineau was part of the New York Sack Exchange. And after he took a quarterback and threw him down to the ground, he would jump up and down like he was going crazy. And when I took a look at some of the guidance models, if I saw the chance for a major snowfall, that's what I was pretty much doing. A Mark Gastineau jumping up and down. But you know what? After so many years and after so many storms, you just get tired. And especially when you live now and have a wife and kids, and there's the potential for property damage or the potential of having to go out there and slog with your snowblower and blow away all that snow and spending the better part of your day doing so in frigidly cold weather or frigid winds, you tend to mellow, so to speak, with the potential of a big snow threat. So I'm not in that category anymore. I know Joe is probably not in that category either, but there was at one time back in the 70s and 80s, we were about as fanatic as far as anyone is concerned for big snowfalls, but you mellow after 20, 30, 40 years. So there you go.
You could
And,
have you could have stopped at 20, 25. You didn't have to go for you didn't have to go to the hot numbers. By the way, I just checked on lightningmaps.org just to see if there's any lightning strikes, and there are no lightning strikes being indicated. So just for what that's worth. But again, with the activity that's going on, I'm sure that at some point we are going to see it. By the way, when you look at the whole radar across the United States, there really isn't a whole lot going on other than the precip around the Great Lakes. There was some snow earlier in north central New York, but has pretty much dried out now. And what's left of those echoes has moved to the east into northeastern New York. There's also a patch of snow showers in the Hudson Valley, in the upper Hudson Valley, near the Albany area, but that doesn't look like it's doing very much. We've got this area here, and they're going for, by the way, I looked at Grand Rapids forecast, and they're going for about 10 to 15 inches or so, but that, again, all spread out between now and Sunday, with some gaps in between. And that snow is coming off of Lake Michigan on a west wind, and and with lake effect, folks, as far as forecasting is concerned, among other things, it's really about looking at the wind direction. And if you have cold air around, and I'm sure there are other things that they look at that, again, Joe and I did not have to deal with forecasting lake effect in our careers, so we're probably not aware of all the tools that the forecasters there in western New York and along the lake shores of Erie and Huron and Michigan and Superior. Those folks probably they know what they're doing when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Actually, Joe, back with the private weather service that I used to work for, one of the first stations that we had was WROC in Rochester, New York, and then later we picked up WHAM. You can hear WHAM very clearly at night from even down in the New York area. They're at 1180 on the dial, and they are in lake effect country, although this is not the synoptic situation for Rochester, as we just saw. Southwesterly winds is the kind of wind that affects Buffalo. For a heavy snow situation, a heavy lake effect snow in Rochester, you need pretty much a west-northwest wind, and we do not have that. I'll get a little bit of snow out of this over the next few days, but and I got to tell you, that was a headache. I mean, like trying to figure out. There was a gentleman in Buffalo, and a weather service, Tom Niziol, and I actually contacted him and asked him for some tips because it just it scared me when I had to forecast a lake effect event because I was young. I had only a few years in the weather business, and this was something completely and totally new, is to try to forecast lake effect snows. I said that yesterday. I said, you have to have like 5 years under your belt before you truly are a forecaster. And I was, that was within the first 5 years of my experience. And it's tough. It is tough to try to forecast lake effect any place in the snow belt regions. But anyway, that was, as I digress back to my younger days.
Yeah, after years on Long Island, I figured out the Long Island sound effect snows that happen every once in a while when you get a really cold Arctic air mass that the wind is blowing right across Long Island Sound. You would get these snow showers that would come in and whiten the ground in spots. Sometimes you'd even get enough going on where you'd wind up with a coating to an inch or so. But it was always a challenge trying to figure out when that was possible, and you'd often wake up with little surprises in the morning from stuff that came in during the overnight. So the satellite tonight, and considering how, except for what's going on in the Great Lakes, when you look at the satellite, there is a fair amount of cloud cover, but there's just not a whole lot of precip happening. Let me just fix this so we can get this all on the screen correctly. There we go. And you can, especially down in the western Gulf of Mexico, the old front is lying across northern Florida. There's clouds there. And then off the Carolina coast and on northeast, well south and east of Nova Scotia. By the way, I barely got to 40 today here. It's 29. It was 29 at showtime. Let me just give the thermometer a quick check. Here in northeast Georgia, it is now 28 here, and they are forecasting a low at Brasstown Bald, which is less than 10 minutes from my house and 2,000, almost 2,500 feet higher. Joe, they're forecasting a low tomorrow morning of 11. So if they get to 11, I think it's possible that I may break under 20. And I have to tell you, this morning when I went out to the dog park, it was 23, and it was clear, and the air was dry. It felt cold. I mean, it really did feel cold.
Now, did you get a coat or a sweater for JJ? Or does he just go out there in this weather and just romp around and get the blood circulating?
No, he's got a very relatively heavy coat of fur. So in the warm months, he doesn't handle it too well. When we go to the dog park, he'll play for a very short period of time, and if it's too hot, if it's too hot, then he'll just lay down on the sand and or underneath the shade someplace. But in the wintertime, right now, with the cold, they love running around. They are so filled with energy, they just run like crazy. So.
Oh, God bless them.
Yes. The northeast tight view, you can actually see the bright white enhanced clouds, that area of enhancement that is now moving over Buffalo and southwestern New York, moving rather quickly to the east. You can also, by the way, you could kind of pick out the trough pretty well. There's an arc of clouds. There's an arc in these clouds that runs from northeastern Michigan and then swings around. It's like a giant comma, Joe. You can pick it out pretty well here, moving from there down to Ohio and moving to the east with those snow showers, with the snow squalls, I should say.
I'm looking here at the latest snowfall reports. Now this is the latest. This is 3 hours old almost. 5:17 p.m. in Cattaraugus County, the town of Randolph. 8.8 inches in Chautauqua County, 3 miles southeast of Kennedy. They have 11 inches already on the ground. Mayville, 6.5. Forestville, 6 inches. In Erie County, Colden is coming in with 10 inches, 10.8 inches, 1 mile west of Colden. Westfall, 6.8. I'm looking here for Buffalo, but I don't think Buffalo's really had much of anything. They do have now snow and 31 degrees, so I guess it is the beginning for them. as far as snowfall, significant snowfall, but there have already been places in and around the snowbelt region of Buffalo that have already gotten hammered with upwards to almost a foot of snow.
Yeah.
And as Johnny Carson used to say, as they went into commercial, more to come.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the big numbers are going to wind up being the highest numbers are probably going to be south of Buffalo uh, before this is all said and done. WPC on their forecast, they've just been pretty much repeating what they've had for the last several days, which is the stripe. This is through tomorrow night. It's I'm going to zoom. Let's see if I can get as close as I can to this. Hang on a second. Kind of wish they had this on a platform where we could zoom in, but you can see the stripe there. That's just right along, just actually sitting right across Lake Erie and then coming into southwestern New York. That's at an inch and a half plus of liquid, and that is for day one. Let's do the 2 day totals. So here's the 2 day totals. And also notice up in north central New York also there's a large stripe there of 2 inches plus of liquid for the next 2 days. The 3 day totals expanded a little bit more. When you look at this, one of the big differences with this lake effect, it's incredibly localized. And, we have these blizzards here in the Northeast. We're usually talking about large areas of geography. Sometimes we've gotten storms that have produced big snows from the deep south all the way up into New England. This is a very, very localized, not to minimize it for the folks that are there, just pointing out that it's confined to those areas just off the lakes. And this is one of those special situations where they get hammered, and we're sitting here along the coastal plain from Maine down to Florida with just basically clear skies and a cold night.
Yeah, and Leon Pravitsky says CPC still has us quite a bit above normal in their 30-day outlook. Well, that could change, Leon. I mean, this situation that we're looking at right now could certainly alter the pattern somewhat, alter it enough to make for a different potential for next Friday and next Saturday, not this Saturday, but the following weekend after Thanksgiving. So I don't know. I've been saying all along, you go much beyond 4 or 5 days, and really it's educated guesswork as opposed to actually, set in stone. We'll see what happens.
And looking at their forecast going ahead, by the way, and certainly would agree with it considering what we've been looking at the last few days. Much of the country is actually quite dry. This is day 3. If you want to go back, here's day 1. You got some patchy snow in Colorado and in southwest Wyoming. There's rain down in South Texas. A little bit of rain touching the Florida Keys. The area of all the precip that you see in the northern plains into the interior Northeast is light snows, except for what's around the lakes where it's heavy. This is Friday night into Saturday night into Sunday night, Sunday night to Monday night. Monday night to Tuesday night. Still very dry. You start to get some rain and precip in the Pacific Northwest at that point. Tuesday night into Wednesday night, big getaway day next week for Thanksgiving, of course, if you're traveling. So at that point, if you're flying south into Florida, there might be some light precip there. Also, if you're flying to the central Gulf Coast, some rain there. And in the Pacific Northwest. But again, much of the country is dry. And then on day 7, WPC actually has some light precip here by Thursday. Now, I don't know if that's from a front that's coming down from the north with what could be a big high trying to build southward, or if that's from a precip. That's probably what it is, because the main precip area, as you can see, is being generated down in the central Gulf states. I find it interesting, though, but when you look at this, I find it interesting that in those model runs that we've had, these off-model runs that keep trying to take a low, way west and north, WPC does not see this that way. Because if you look at where they have their max precip areas, it's all down in the south. So that could be telling here in terms of how they're viewing this, seeing perhaps that the blocking is going to be, it's going to be there, and we this is one of those days where they stop at day 7 and you really need to see day 8 because that would be next Friday. But they seem to be they certainly are looking at those primary runs of the model guidance and thinking that if there's going to be an error here in terms of what the models are doing, it's going to be more south than anything else.
I have a high temperature on my Hudson Valley forecast on my Facebook page of 51 on Wednesday. And I base that in part on the fact that we have a cold front north of us and we'll have westerly winds. I assume they'll be out of a westerly direction. And compression effects will actually help to warm things up a bit and warm it up to or even above 50 degrees. Now, I've seen forecasts for Thanksgiving Day and beyond calling for temperatures at or above 50 degrees. And I'm scratching my head about that, Joe. I don't understand that. For example, I think that if that cold front with that big high pressure dome that's stretching south and southeast from central Canada continues to push that front through, probably come Wednesday night, and we'll be behind that front on Thursday. And as the high bleeds in, we should be colder. I'm thinking temperatures on Thanksgiving Day will be about 10 degrees colder than what we will see here on Wednesday, and that will continue on to the end of the week on Black Friday. Yet I've seen forecasts. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I look at other. I don't even know why I'm looking at other forecasts just out of curiosity, I guess, because it's a big holiday. I'm seeing all these other forecasts saying, and on Thanksgiving Day, we're going to have a high of 51 degrees. And we're going to have a high in the low 50s on Thanksgiving Day. And I'm saying, how? How is that possible? Are you looking at the maps? Are you looking at the long range? Are you looking at that big cold high over central Canada bleeding southward? I don't see it. Maybe I should just get out of the forecasting game after 40 some odd years, and maybe I'm not seeing what the youngins are seeing.
Yeah, the youngins.
In this. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you Wednesday, Joe, on the digital forecast map of the Weather Service that I just put up on the screen here. For Wednesday, they have a high of 49 at Poughkeepsie and I don't know where that dot is at 52, but it's not far from New York City. Right over New York City, they got a 51. I'm on the same I am on the same page with you with the same logic. If you're going to look at this, if you're going to, in one breath, if you're going to talk about the chance that there could be a storm system at the end of next week, and then in the other breath, go for a high of 50 on in the 50s on Thanksgiving Day, you're not, it's not synced. It doesn't make sense. Now, you know what? Here's what I'll say. If for whatever reason, if that high takes longer to get in, then maybe you'll get to 50 until the wind shifts to the north and you start to get the colder air to come in. That's probably the way. That's the one way I think you could probably see temperatures get up above 50 on Thursday. But it's going to be a question of the timing of the front. But you're being consistent. You're thinking that the front's going to be there or nearby or through.
You'll go back. We'll look back years from now and say, well, they had a high of 50 on Thanksgiving Day in 2022. But yeah, that could very well be left over from the day before. And meanwhile, come Thursday afternoon, it's down like closer to 40 than 50. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm an old fogey.
So let's talk about what we're looking at here for the end of next week and why there's a chance that we could see something of significance. And this is from the overnight run from last night. I used this morning on some of the analysis that I wrote about on my website and on my subscription site. But this is what the upper air by the GFS from last night was forecast for Friday morning, and you have a blocky pattern developing. I call it blocky because the strongest part of this block is actually off the map east of Greenland near Scandinavia. That is really what's pulsating here with ridging that's building westward into Greenland and into northeastern Canada. So you've got this block this blocky pattern that's developing there. And whenever you have that, you're going to force the jet stream pattern to be overall much further south than it otherwise would be. The upper low, all the troughing that's going on in the east now is going to pull out, but part of it's going to want to be left back, and that's the upper low that you see sitting there in Labrador. Now, that could wind up being anywhere from Labrador down to Newfoundland at the end of the day. That's what will make a big difference in terms of what's going on. In the south, you see that there's a system there that I've identified where it says storm system, the closed upper low in Alabama and Mississippi. You have an upper high and a not too shabby upper high in Southern California, and then you have a trough, not too deep, but deep enough, probably around 150 or so west, 145, 150 west out in the Pacific. So all the signature things that you look for in terms of something impacting the East Coast are all here. Now, what we need to look for is if that block is too strong, what's going to happen is that southern system is just going to get suppressed and just kind of get lost. And when we looked at today's European, for example, that's exactly what the European did. Starting now, I'm moving through the rest of this week. You see the deep trough, the troughing in the east, the series of short waves that are moving through the Great Lakes that's producing all this lake effect stuff. Here we are on Friday, and now we're going to Saturday and Sunday. The strongest trough swinging around Sunday morning. That's not too shabby a looking trough there. It's fairly sharp. Swings on through, and of course, the whole east is cold except for Central and South Florida. Then that lifts out. This is the newest run that just came in. I'm going to switch over to the 12Z run. Now, what the European did was it just pulls out that trough, leaves an upper low behind in Hudson Bay, which just rotates around and then heads off toward Newfoundland and then really strengthens out in the Atlantic. Another upper trough drops down to Lake Winnipeg. It leaves, Joe, I don't know if this is right. See, there's a system coming into the Pacific Northwest, which is going to be the system that moves across. The European drops that down and cuts it off into Mexico and leaves it there. And all we're left with is a strengthening trough in the east and a strengthening northwest flow out of Canada that would just say that we'll get a front to come through, a high will build in, it'll just be cold and dry right through next Sunday. I mean, if you look at this is a fairly cold-looking upper air for the end of next week and into next weekend, but there'd be no storm because there's no room. I'm gonna conjecture here that this thing down here that the European is wrong on that. That it's not going to, famous last words on my part, but it's not going to drop that energy. Instead of swinging it east, the European drops it into Mexico. I'm going to say that that's wrong. The GFS to me makes a bit more sense, where they're kind of on the same page as we go through Tuesday. The eastern trough lifts out. See the GFS takes that energy in the Pacific Northwest, it takes it east into Montana and the Dakotas, and then drops it in. I'm sorry, I got to go back one run here. There we go. To the 12Z. You can see the GFS drops it in to Iowa, Missouri, and swings it eastward as a strengthening cutoff low that brings it right over Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And then because of the blocky nature, and you see the blocking here, right up in here, so your upper lows are much further south than they otherwise would be. They take that track much further to the south, and this to me speaks to the overall pattern. Is the block going to be strong enough to do this, or is it going to be so strong, especially with what's going on out in the Atlantic, which is very busy? Is it going to be so strong that you're going to wind up with something more suppressed? I find it hard to see an outcome unless the blocking is really weak. And then you have what the 18Z run has, which I'm discounting. I'm getting like you now with these in-between runs. The 18Z run, yeah, the 18Z run, the blocking is much weaker. All of a sudden on the 18Z run, there's an upper low sitting in the Davis Strait. Where did that come from? Instead of dropping it down into eastern Canada, it builds a ridge there so that the next system that comes out winds up going up to the Great Lakes. And today, by the way, today was the GFS on the in-between run, Joe. It was the GFS's turn to have a 984 low in southwest Michigan that goes up into eastern Canada. And then it gets cold and dry behind it. I think that's wrong. And by the way, one other thing, and this could also be the part of the equation. Look what's on the lower right. Once again, look what's on the lower right in 7 days. There's a system here that looks almost like a tropical storm. Whereas this model on the in-between runs has been, the last week or so, keeps spinning up these things. And I just don't know if that's probably what one of the causes of the difference in the in-between runs, because it keeps spinning up these tropical systems.
Yeah.
And there's another one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to discount this idea. To me, it's all about the block and how strong is that block going to be as we head through next week.
I just want to mention both Izzy D and further back, we have Leon Probitsky and also Angelo, all hitting Super Chat tonight. We thank all three of you. I'm just making sure that I'm not missing out on somebody. Steve Lapointe and also Thomas Eddy. They have all hit Super Chats tonight, Joe, which means that if for nothing else, in case we can't get hold of a turkey, at least we can use that money to go to McDonald's and buy some food for us for next Thursday.
Or to Costco and get a rotisserie chicken.
Exactly.
By the way, looking at the 12Z run, if you're forecasting it literally off the 12Z run, Joe, there is no way on God's green earth that it will be 50 in New York, anywhere close to New York on Thanksgiving Day.
Well,
I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this right now. The front comes through. Actually, the front comes through Wednesday evening. You've got you've got this big high that's pressing down with a northeast wind and a low in southern Indiana that is moving eastward. How in the name of heaven are you going to? Actually, I'll tell you something. You could have it. I could make a case for where we not only might not make 50. If this is right, you wonder whether it might not get much higher than the upper 30s and low 40s.
Right. Exactly. Precisely. But it's what I said. You need like 5 years in this business, and I can tell you that in a lot of cases on a lot of television stations, the guy you see or the gal you see who's in front of the camera is not the person who did the forecast. They're relying on somebody behind the scenes, somebody very likely who's just out of college, just getting his or her feet wet, and that's why you see these discrepancies sometimes, and that's why you have curmudgeons like Joe and myself who sit in front of the TV, see these forecasts, and start yelling at the TV screen, like, what are you doing? Why are you going so high?
You know what? I stopped doing that a long time ago, but once upon a time that was the case.
Yeah.
And I went to I'm just, by the way, if you look at the 0Z run from last night, I mean, here it takes a low across Mississippi and Alabama and off the South Carolina coast. And, the big high just presses in and the low, deepens as it moves pretty far out to the east. But look, that's in a case where the block is stronger. It's not super strong, but it's stronger. And, these are once again, that's to me is the focus here. Here's the NAO forecast. And at the end of next week, we're at 1 standard deviation negative on the NAO. So we're reaching the bottom in terms of how strong it is. This was based off of last night's ensemble run. So the pieces are there. The pieces are here. We know what we're dealing with. Now it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of getting through we're 8 days we're 8 days away, so there's a lot that's going to change between now and early next week in terms of how the models handle this block, and that to me is front and center in terms of forecasting. So get ready for the emotional roller coaster, all you snow weenies out there, because you'll all look at one run and jump for joy until the next run, where you will be gnashing of teeth and wailing from a disappointment, only to be followed by another jump for joy on the run that follows, only to be followed by more gnashing of teeth and wailing on the one that follows that. And up and down and up and down.
And a couple of people, I know Leon Probitsky and a couple of other people were talking about the old Farmer's Almanac and the other Farmer's Almanac. What do they call for Thanksgiving? So here, I've got the old Farmer's Almanac here, and I've got the other Farmer's Almanac here. So just for the heck of it, let's open it up. And for the Northeast and New England, the Farmer's Almanac says Thanksgiving Day, which is the 24th through the 27th, weather markedly improves for Thanksgiving, mostly fair and cold. That's what the Farmer's Almanac says. And as far as the old Farmer's Almanac is concerned, again, if you're just wondering, I know Leon said, maybe the old Farmer's Almanac is going to be right. They are saying they have a stretch from the 20th through the 27th. Again, Thanksgiving is on the 24th. Rain and snow showers and chilly. What's today? Today is the 18th, right? 17th. So supposedly we're going to start seeing rain and snow showers next Sunday, continuing all the way out through most of next week. So there you go. I don't know what do you want to believe or who you want to believe.
Izzy D says models have not improved in the last 5 years. I'm going to disagree with that strongly. I think models actually have improved as a whole over these last 5 or 10 years. I think the forecasters have not improved because the models are being, Joe, and I think you'll agree with me, the models are being misused. They're being they're being used as basically whatever it says, that's what we're going to do.
Exactly.
There's no forecasting. I don't want to put every forecaster into this because that would not be fair. But I think there are a lot of forecasters out there that just look, whatever it says, it says. And then when you watch them, that's what they tell you. Well, the model is, let's put the future cast up. Let's do a real cop out here. Let's put the future cast up. Let's let the future cast model,
the RPM,
do my job for me. Okay. And they will seldom. I have rarely seen anybody put the forecast, put that up, and say, you know what, this is not quite right. Okay. This is not quite right. But the point
they
is,
overuse the future. You want to know when you use the future cast? You use it in advance of a big storm. When you think that there's going to be a lot of rain and or snow, then you show the future cast and how everything is going to move forward. The precip moves over your area, and you see how everything is going to. But they use the darn thing every single night in most cases, and there's no need to do that. I'm seeing one forecaster on television. He's showing you a little dot of blue over Ulster County, and he's pointing to that, and he's emphasizing. Now, see that dot of blue? That means we may have a snow flurry tomorrow. Come on, there's nothing going on in our immediate vicinity. Do something else. Draw a map with isobars. That would be a novelty, wouldn't it? For a change. To my last day on television, Joe, I was still drawing isobars on my map.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. But you're right. They look at the models. Some of these people, again, young people who have only had a few years experience, they look at the models and they take whatever the models say as Bible. And of course, one of the things that Alan Casper taught the two of us on some nights when Alan was doing the weather at CBS back in the 70s, he would say openly, he says, well, the LFM guidance model is saying this, but I don't believe it, and I'm throwing it in the trash can. And he actually went for something else, or something based upon observations that he was looking at. Or you could also take the Tennessee Ernie Ford basis for weather forecasting, where you look at something, you look at a certain model forecast, and you say to yourself,
I
Well, as
ain't
the whale said
said
to
to
Jonah,
Jonah, I ain't a
"I ain't
swallowing that.
swallowing that."
Oh God. By the way, um, so some who's on the chat board that said this. Brandon Doherty just hit the tip jar. Thank you, Brandon, and thank you for bringing up someone who makes a regular appearance on this show. Maybe not regular. That's probably overstating it, but does make occasional appearances on this show, Joe. And do you know who I'm talking about?
Who are you talking about, Joe?
I'm talking about Mrs. Ann
And
Sambles.
Sambles.
Yes. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can get Mrs. Ann Sambles. She's a shy sort. Um, yeah, there she goes. But this is interesting for Mrs. Ann Sambles. In spite of what the operational run is doing, Joe, you can see where the mean position here is for this is for the Friday morning, and it's got the mean position is right near the bench to the west of the bench, just west of the benchmark. I got it circled there.
Which model is this? Which ensembles is this?
This is the GFS.
Yeah. Okay.
Mrs. Ann Sambles. She's come to the rescue of the operational model. So Mrs. Ann Sambles has it. And if we look at the upper air, Mrs. Ann Sambles also has a fairly nice trough there in the eastern part of the United States. So that's supportive. And why don't we see? Maybe we could take a look at the European Ann Sambles. Yeah, even the European is not as overwhelming. It's not quite like the operational where it overwhelmed with cold air and showed nothing. Let's see what the member. Yeah, so look at the European ensemble. Considering that it showed nothing, Joe, the European ensembles have a low, a bunch of lows clustered east of the Delaware coast Friday afternoon and going to the benchmark at 40 and 70. Look at that.
Amazing.
Very interesting. So.
Yeah. Could you give me sharing capabilities for a moment? Since
it's what I live for.
We're coming to the end, and I just want to mention something astronomical tomorrow night.
Oh, okay. Hang on 1 second.
If some of you don't have anything else to do at 1 o'clock in the morning, Friday night, Saturday morning. All right, let me just get this up here and share this. I'm going to show you something. All right, what you're seeing on your screen right now, let me just, can I make this just a little smaller? Okay, yeah. Actually, let me make it larger. This way you can get a chance to see it all. What you're seeing now is a series of photographs that I took from Brodhersville, Pennsylvania. This is where my in-laws live in northeast Pennsylvania, in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, when the skies were really very dark there. This is in 1996. If you're into the constellations, you may notice the W of Cassiopeia, the Queen. And what you're seeing here is a streak. I saw a fireball meteor. This meteor was so bright, it actually cast shadows for the 1 or 2 seconds that it was in the sky, and it left behind a trail, an incandescent trail, which hung in the sky. Now, this trail appears at like 70 or 80 miles above us in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and you could see over a span of a couple of minutes later, it's already beginning to bend a little bit, and after 5 minutes, yes, 5 minutes, this trail was still visible to the eye. It bent like a boomerang, so to speak. I show you this picture because tomorrow night, sometime between 12:30 and 1:30 a.m., we are expected to pass or interact with a trail of debris that was shed by a comet, Comet Tempel-Tuttle, back in 1733. And this produces the annual Leonid meteor shower. And presumably, some of the pieces involved with this passage are larger than normal and could very well produce meteors of this brightness, very, very bright. And I'm not going to say how many. I've seen in some cases online, people say, well, you may see as many as 300 per hour. Don't even look at that. Quite frankly, I think the amounts will be much, much lower than that. But if I get a chance to see one or two of these kind of meteors tomorrow night, again, this is between 12:30 and 1:30 a.m. That would make my entire night. That would make my entire week. These are the Leonid meteors. They slam into the Earth head on. They move around the sun in the opposite direction from the Earth at a speed of 45 miles per second. That's why the Leonids are usually very bright, and if they're of any significant size, they could be quite spectacular. And again, tomorrow night, in that 1 hour time interval between 12:30 and 1:30 a.m., it's actually early Saturday morning, 19th of November, there are predictions that we are going to run through an area of meteoroids which could possibly produce meteors of this caliber, this brightness. And this got me in trouble, Joe. This series of photographs got me in trouble with the FBI, believe it or not. This is absolutely a true story. I was at my in-laws' house in Pennsylvania, took this photograph or series of photographs of this dazzling fireball and its trail that it left behind. The next morning at 7 a.m., my phone rings, or the phone rings at my in-laws' house. I pick it up. Who do you think was on the other end? Ken Dickman, the late great Ken Dickman,
Right.
from News 12 Long Island. And I had mentioned to Ken before I left to go to my in-laws' house about the Leonid shower and how, we may see some very bright meteors. It turns out that on the same night that I took this photograph, and this came some months after the TWA Flight 800 disaster, where, if you remember, a plane went down off of the coast of Long Island, and nobody knew what it was, why the plane went down, but a lot of people claimed that they saw a streak of light in the sky that struck the plane before it came crashing down into the ocean. And because of that, a lot of pilots in the aftermath, thinking that maybe somebody was shooting, missiles at them, there was a Pakistani airline flight on that same night that I was out photographing meteors that claimed that they saw rockets being shot at them from the ground as they were passing over Long Island. So Ken Dickman calls me up the next morning and tells me about this and says, "You said there was a meteor shower, weren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, there was." And I said, "I even took pictures. I think I got a good one of a very bright fireball." Next thing I know, I'm talking to Phil Mintz of Newsday. Phil says to me, "I hear that you got from Ken Dickman, you got a picture of one of these things?" I said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "Could we send a messenger over to your home and pick up the roll of film that you took?" Remember, this is back in the days of film, folks. And I said, "Sure." So a guy from Newsday comes along, takes my roll of film. The next day, in the Monday edition of Newsday, on page 3, covering like half the page, are my pictures showing this streak, and then the story about the guy, the pilot from Pakistani airline, talking about rockets being shot up toward the plane or whatever. He was probably seeing Leonid meteors instead. And before I know it, after that photograph or the series of photographs were published, later that afternoon when I went to work at News 12 Westchester, I pick up my phone, and it was an agent from the FBI. The FBI calling, and the guy is questioning me. He said, "What are the odds that a meteor could have hit the plane and brought it down?" I said, "Astronomical," or whatever. He said, "Well, we'd like to take a look at your pictures a little bit more carefully and see if we can make something out of it from the report that we got from the pilot of the Pakistani." And I got a couple of more phone calls with and I'm saying to myself, all I wanted to do was spend a relaxing weekend at my in-laws' house under the stars and taking pictures of a meteor shower. And all of a sudden, I'm being dragged into an FBI case with the FBI about rockets hitting aircraft and hitting planes. Anyway, if you're out and about tomorrow night, again between 12:30 and 1:30, and looking up at the sky, look up at the sky and overhead and toward the northeast, you might just see a very bright, or maybe a few very bright meteors streaking across the sky. Again, it's not anybody shooting rockets. It's probably, in all likelihood, the Leonid meteor shower, and that will be again for tomorrow night. And there you go.
That's incredible. That is incredible.
But it's true. It's a true story. The most surprised person was when I picked up the phone bleary-eyed in Pennsylvania, and I'm hearing Ken Dickman, who was really a great guy. He was our assignment editor at News 12 Long Island, and he passed on about a year ago. But I was like, Ken, what are you calling? How did you get this number? And actually, he called my house in Levittown, and my wife gave him the number for her parents' house in Pennsylvania. And one thing led to another, and here I am now all of a sudden involved with the FBI. But anyway,
too funny.
Hopefully nothing like that will happen to any of you if you go out tomorrow night to look for shooting stars.
One last look at the radar from Buffalo, which, by the way, Joe, I just looked at their hourly observations. They're reporting 1/4 of a mile in S plus in Buffalo, and you could see the big dark green and yellow echoes. One batch is over them now. There's more coming in off of Lake Erie, and there's still more behind it. So they're going to put it down for the next with this band over the next several hours or more.
Yeah.
And they got a long way to go yet before it's all said and done. So
a long way, yeah.
So are we going to be back before Sunday? Just wondering.
Why? Is there any need to be back before Sunday, aside from just talking about
Buffalo?
The lake effect, about Buffalo?
I'm going to say for now, no. But if need be, if something really crazy happens, we could maybe pop on either tomorrow or Saturday. But let's for now plan on taking the next 2 days off, which means that Joe and I will not be back until Sunday morning. Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Okay?
Yeah, right.
Thanks for those of you who hit the tip jar tonight. Thank you for everybody participating on the chat board and being part of the Joe and Joe Weather Show once again and for another week. So I'm going to bed because I'm exhausted. So I am going to go to bed now. So
you're not going to watch Stephen Colbert with pickleball in about 10 minutes?
No, I'm going to bed.
Okay.
So we'll see everybody on Sunday morning. By then we'll have maybe a little bit of a better idea of what may happen at the end of Thanksgiving week. So have a great night and a good weekend. We'll see you on Sunday. And come on, 2 more likes to get us over 100, please. We're at 98.
We made it.
Oh, we did?
We made it.
Okay, great. So we'll see everybody on Sunday. Night, everybody.
Nighty night.